Ready to go?
You're now live on YouTube.
Thank you. Welcome everyone here that is here in person and also those who are on YouTube live. We welcome you to our City Council work session meeting. It is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021, and it's 5:30 p.m. Excuse me, 5:30 p.m. And we'd like to begin our meeting tonight by, we're all present, which is great. And thank you for being here, everyone. And we'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Is there anyone here that would like to lead us in that?
I can lead us, Mayor.
Thank you, Nick.
Please stand and repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'd also like to have an invocation or an inspirational thought. Is there anyone willing to do that for us tonight?
I have a thought.
Go ahead.
Henry Ford said, "Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success."
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. All right. We have discussion items tonight, 2 of them. The first will be a presentation by Utah State University Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning Department faculty and students. Jason, would you like to introduce them?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
So the setup is a little bit different tonight. Obviously, we have this really cool model in the middle of the room, and once they get started, the council is welcome to come down and we can kind of look more around the model because there'll be some cool things to look at there. But first, I just wanted to take a minute and thank the wonderful faculty and staff and students that are here today and the great work they've done. Just a little context for the public that is watching. It's probably, 2.5, 3 years ago that we first kind of started working with Jake Powell and Todd Johnson at Utah State University in the Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning Department. And we saw an opportunity to do some envisioning in Santaquin City, and they selected us to have Santaquin be used for their project in some of their programs and their classes. And we're thrilled that they chose us and thrilled with the work that they've done. Appreciate the good work and the collaboration that they've done to make this possible. So recognize Professor Todd Johnson here, and we have Professor Jake Powell in the back. We also want to recognize Professor David Anderson. He wasn't able to make it here tonight, but he also was an integral part, and I think was one of the main teachers for the seniors that are here with us tonight. We have 6 students here tonight. I also, I don't know if I have a chance to do this, but I want to, 4, 5. 4. We have 4 students here with us. But I want to give a shout out. You can see this amazing model, but it's my understanding that Justin, what's your last name, Justin?
Jakes.
Justin Jakes, he was at the forefront and an integral part in making this model. So we want to recognize him for the work that he's done and everything to the stand for the projector and everything. So we're just thrilled to have you here. We appreciate you making the trip to meet with us in person. We did have a virtual meeting a couple weeks ago, and we have that presentation. We're still looking for the link for that, and that's something we're going to provide to the community, and we'd encourage them to look at that. And that'll be some great ideas and great things that can be used in the general plan update process that is currently underway. So I don't want to take up any more time. I'll turn it over to Todd Johnson, and he'll show you what they brought with them today.
Thanks, Jason. We also have with us Professor Carolyn Lavoie, and we, as part of extension and outreach, we look up and down the Wasatch Front as well as occasionally in adjoining states or adjacent states for opportunities to help out. And that's really Jake's charge as extension specialist in our department. And so when you came to us, we were actually extraordinarily thrilled, partly because I guess we'd driven through Santaquin enough times and we recognized how special it was. And then as we started getting down and meeting the people and engaging with the mayor and this council and other citizens throughout the process, we found that there was really a spirit about the place that matched the beauty of the place. And speaking as a kind of experienced from a small town guy whose small town was destroyed by complacency. You know, I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, and somebody decided to create a transportation bypass around the downtown, and it kind of eviscerated the spirit of the city, and it's affected that town to this day, as well as just the, you know, lateral expansion of Wilmer, Minnesota. So when we get involved in things like this, the professors bring some experience. I happen to have a lot of gray hair, so I have a lot of experience, and Jake has a tremendous amount of experience. He actually is from, what? I know you're from there.
Gray hair.
He lost his. He's from around the corner, American Fork, and so he's a local boy, and he actually tells a tale that he has descendants that were originated from Santaquin. So his legacy resides here. So we took the last 14 weeks. We had great participation from Ben and Jason and Penny and Betsy and you all when we came down here. The mayor turned out. And all council members participated. And as a result, we have, I think, some really amazing work. I just want to say one last thing before we turn it over to the students and get into the work. What this means to students is that they have work that they can show as evidence of that work which has engaged with the public, that has a realism to it, but it also has a spirit of their kind of youthful thinking and their kind of embarking upon this sort of careers that involve envisioning what a place could be or anticipating what the challenges of a place could be. So Amy Cervantes has a job as a result partly of this, of her portfolio being enhanced by the work of Santaquin in Salt Lake City. Josh Quigley has a job in South Lake Tahoe as a result of partly working on this and guiding the connectivity group. Jacob Mortensen, what can we say about Jacob? He's decided to go to law school, so next year, so you'll see him somewhere. Justin Jakes is going to the Bureau of Land Management. So we need private and public sector visioning and strength and courage to make a better world for us. The context of this is missing. There it is. Will the sound pick up, Kenny? Over here. I mean, this is a simple enough diagram. I'll just say that.
You can come right here, Todd, if you'd like.
No, that's not complicated enough yet. When I get into the presentation, that's pretty simple. The students do a good job of simplifying things. One of the things that is evident in a lot of Jake Powell's work and discussions that we have is that, and this may seem like a little far-fetched, but I lived for 35 years in Denver, and that front called the Front Range is really a continuous band of development now, pretty much from certainly Colorado Springs all the way up to Greeley, if not from Pueblo. And the Wasatch Front is you know, moving in the same direction. And if you think about the coastal megaplexes, which are even more complex, it's kind of a similar phenomena that we are going to, in the Wasatch Front, experience extraordinary, unprecedented growth. And so this reaching out to us was to say, how can we avoid the mistakes that my forebears in Wilmer, Minnesota made? How can we anticipate what some of this pressure could mean? And how does the student involvement in 7 teams, how can it help the city prepare to create conversations, elevate awareness, and make a difference in the future? One of our graduate students, Jessica Clements, her granddad said to her before she decided to come to school at Utah State, and she said, you either decide what your fate and your future is going to be, or someone else will determine it for you. And that was her grandpa's vision for Jessica, and that really sticks out in my mind in terms of how it applies to you. So we've got a wonderful model. We've got 7 teams involved in different geographies of your community, and also in certain topical areas like agritourism. And we hope that you will reach out and your constituents will reach to you and help extend this into various forms of implementation in the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
2 feet shorter than Todd. I'm Amy with the downtown team. We were really excited to be able to get a recent citizen survey so we could find out what they wanted out of their city. And we saw that there were about 6 things that most of the citizens seemed to agree on. First is that they wanted to keep and celebrate agriculture. They are fond of the small town feel and perceive growth as a threat. They don't want higher taxes. They want trails and open-ended recreation, sidewalks for existing homes, and local businesses and opportunities to support startups. So in dark blue, that's Santaquin's potential build out to the potential maybe in like 30 years or so. All the way to the edges, and if it's like the rest of the valley, it's all single family homes. All that new infrastructure has to be built and paid for, and the agriculture gets eaten up. So instead of perpetuating that, downtown should focus growth that takes advantage of existing infrastructure. We also did an analysis of Main Street because that's generally where downtowns are. And it's kind of got a lot of downsides. It's owned by UDOT and they're expanding it from 2 to 4 lanes. It lacks sidewalks and a cohesive identity. Many of the buildings are set very far back and they're disconnected from their street. However, we also found a lot of opportunities in that light blue. That's the new downtown range. We have Center Street coming down in the dark blue. That's Main Street in the dark blue as well. There's an intersection right there on Main and Center that is planned to have a light with UDOT, and that's a perfect point to pivot down onto Center Street to celebrate the new town hall, the library, the historic house that's there on Main and Center, and the new civic campus that's going to be there soon. So one of the things we looked into a lot is having a form-based building code, which is used to shape the street edges to provide a welcoming small town experience. And it doesn't have to be scary. That is form-based code. It's comfortable and it's small, but there's mixed use, and it's not as much about government controlling everything as much as it is about preserving a sense of place and fostering an identity. So this is South Lake, Texas. They used form-based code to get a space that feels good, but it was only built this way because it was regulated for. So here our master plan, with Main Street being that very long one, and then Center Street right next to that park, just on the right of the park. The main goal with this plan for downtown wasn't to raise the neighborhoods, but to have infill and fade into the surrounding housing so that there aren't any stark contrasts. We'll look at Main Street first because it does still matter. So even though we can't control the lanes or the speed, we can choose to have buildings provide comfortable edges to the street, because letting them fade off into the distance leaves people feeling naked and vulnerable when they're walking on the street. So up next is Center Street. And this section is looking north. Comfortably wide sidewalks, on-street parking, so we still have parking, protected bike lanes, mixed-use buildings. They make it fun and convenient to be there. A rolled curve into bioswale, like on the left, helps mitigate stormwater as well. Next up is 100 South, which leads to Santaquin Elementary. The day-to-day, it'll be a calm street that encourages people to walk or bike their kids to school with wide bike lanes and a double alley of trees, framing the sidewalks and providing shade. On holidays and weekends, a block can be closed off, that civic campus block to the north, closed off to cars for things like farmers markets. And then finally we have the civic campus itself. And it has a lot of things in it, but most importantly, it has a naturalized splash pad that brings people in from 100 South. It has swings on a little berm down there on the bottom left, overlooking the open lawn with views out to the mountains. And it does have a retention lawn out by the museum because
So
water
north
does
is
naturally
up and to the
flow.
left.
North was up, yeah. The splash pad is to the north. And that's the town hall right up there in the upper left. So, in conclusion for downtown, it's not about packing people in. It's about preserving the agriculture by building on existing infrastructure, supporting local businesses by providing a critical mass of people to frequent them, and providing more community spaces for every resident of Santaquin.
The sequence of the projects and the teams. So this team, people were off to jobs and other places, so I have to stand in for this. So unfortunately, you get me a couple times. But we go clockwise. So from the downtown, we go to South Gateway, which is essentially the entrance from the south to the north into the Salt Lake Valley. And obviously, it's the last point of experience of the Salt Lake Valley when you're moving south. So it's a really important kind of point. Like point of the mountain used to be what this is kind of the new point of the mountain. And so as such, the interchange that's proposed here being high above the area that looks over the reservoir, it's a really vulnerable first impression. It's a very significant point. Obviously residential's coming in on the western ledges or ridges, and so Jacob's going to talk a little bit about how residential moves up into those foothills. But this is a very delicate place because it really is a first impression of many coming to Santaquin from the south. And so it is also connected in some ways potentially to the downtown. So Amy just described what's going on to recenter energy in the downtown. We want these two things to connect together. And it relates in different ways through the freeway to agriculture that can be celebrated at both the north and the south. So we think this idea of agritourism and agriculture should be maintained and distributed and sustained throughout the diagram. And the reservoir is another idea that when you all took us first out for a drive around and we looked into that dry bed and imagined that full of water, and we said, God, this just adds to the beauty of this place. You know, you got Utah Lake to the north, and now you got your own little Utah Lake inside Santaquin. It's just amazing. So this group really embraced, how do we take the energy of the freeway, the opportunity of the reservoir, and the ability to create open land and create a kind of mixed-use community within that. And so the diagram on the left there really shows how commercial is organized around a newly proposed street structure and road structure that connects the reservoir and transit to the north to the upper left, down to a main intersection that crosses the tracks to the west and connects out to the freeway, and then establishing a business park opportunity, the red square to the south end, with residential filling in. So whereas a lot of people would say, you want this mostly commercial, commercial only absorbs at a certain pace. So in order for this gateway to be established, we need to think of it as a kind of a more mixed use development, commercial and residential together. And so you can kind of see the patterns there on the right. So it starts with the energy of potentially future transit. We looked at transit, the commuter rail, in a couple of locations for you. And Justin's going to talk about an alternate location up at Main Street and the West Gateway entry. But this location would help fortify this development opportunity in the south end of the city, and it would also provide a bridge up to the residential development around the reservoir area. There's the existing soccer field that co-joins with that. We think that commercial and shopping and retail will always be part of an interchange related opportunity. The unfortunate thing about a lot of interchange development in cities across the country is it happens just like willy-nilly. There's no structure or organization to it. So this first community piece is intended to be more surface park and road related within the first 5 or 10 years. That would give way eventually to a walkable center, a more mixed-use center, more like a Farmington kind of an outcome. And that we would also create some recreational opportunities across the freeway. In all cases, we're looking at opportunities both east and west of I-15, and also a school to fortify that community, and then ultimately a business component down in the southern end. So this looks at kind of zoning this, and then residential would go up and integrate into the existing southern edge of the downtown. So from a phasing perspective, it'd probably be residential heavy in the near term, looking at business and commercial opportunities in the midterm, the infill, and then a fuller mixed-use program ultimately that connects out to the freeway. Now, there might be pressure in the near term to put things near the freeway as well, commercial and shopping opportunities, but the students really felt that it needed some structure. It needed to be organized around a hierarchy of streets and open space. And that kind of gives you a broad view of what that looks like. Oops. Reservoir Transect. Jacob Mortensen.
All right, so the Reservoir Transect team is just north of that south gateway right by the reservoir. Here's a little key map showing that whole area that we looked at just south of Main Street and east of I-15. So when we say Transect, we kind of looked at this area because it's very large, a little different than a lot of the rest of our cohort. So this diagram kind of shows what a transect is, and it's different zones with levels of activity and different things going on in them. And it's very important that a city has that variety of options and activity levels. Otherwise, there's lots of other social and economic problems that come with not having enough options. And that's included with housing. A lot of times you'll see here on the ends of this diagram, then the white is either detached single-family homes or mid-rise apartments. And a lot of times that's like the way developers swing. It's either gets developed all as single-family or all is extremely dense. But there's this missing middle of lots of options and varieties to serve all the different people in the community, and it's missing in Utah especially. But often this is where people like my age, where we need to live. I can't afford a single family home. I don't want to live in a mid-rise. I want some options in the middle, and so that's what this type of housing is all about. So we really looked at from the mountains, and you have a basin in the mountains all the way across. So you can see this like kind of rough diagram showing this amazing natural resource and amenity that Santaquin is like built in. But this amenity is only there as long as we take care of it, so it can very easily be wiped away. And this kind of shows just the actual images of that transect across Santaquin from the west mountains all the way to the mountains in the east. So this is Daybreak, Utah, and this kind of shows an example of a good transect. You have mountains, and then it's going to residential, and then it's changing with different varieties of housing options up to mixed use, very walkable, and then open space. Those are all important parts of a transect. That's something we'd like to include in, or we think would be good in Santaquin. So here is a section cut line and kind of the transect line that we examined along Santaquin, going from the West Mountains down into the hills, the Summit Ridge development. You have the reservoir, the agricultural lands, I-15, then going back up into the hills and more of the mountains. Something we took a lot of time examining was those west hills. As you can see, here's like a rough diagram with the different there's the steep grades areas of green space that we thought should be preserved, both for environmental reasons, but also for a view shed. As you drive down I-15 towards Santaquin, you can see Summit Ridge on I-15, and you can barely see the tops of the hills. But as development continues, if those hills get covered up, it'll be have a big impact on the feel and the views in Santaquin and also the environment. So we looked at putting future residential development in these hills into the little valleys and the nooks and crannies, so people can still enjoy the outdoor space, but you're not destroying the views that everyone else can share and take part of. And that also allows for trails and other development up there, so that we would save a lot of green space that is too steep or are the peaks of these ridges. as you can see on this diagram. So here's like a simplified diagram of our transect with the green space, residential, and then mixed-use commercial spread throughout. And then this is the master plan illustration of that. In this diagram, you can see how it's all single family up in the hills and then slowly transitions to a range of single family and multifamily options along with mixed use and commercial. So it's a really walkable area that everyone can walk to wherever their basic needs can be met. But it's also friendly for cars and vehicles as well. This shows the green space of the area. We wanted a really strong corridor so that people could easily get to the reservoir and access that, and then also connect to an agricultural hub that the agritourism team designed there. So in conclusion, it's really just a lot of different options with transportation, with housing, and by looking at it as a transect, you can really respect the topography and the existing natural amenities to really continue to show off and make this the beautiful place that it is.
Hello there. I'm Justin Jakes. One fact that was left out is I actually grew up here for most of my childhood, about 4 or 5 years up on the bench. So I really had a passion when diving into this project with a lot of my teammates. So my team, with Helen and Stan, who were my teammates, we did the West Gateway. And there you can see the area identified. It's the area that's leading out to Genola and Gosher, I believe, out on the western edge of the lake. And we realized this area has a lot of public ground and a lot of potential to be definitely built up, especially as Utah continues to expand and grow. So our team took over this area and we dove in it to see what options we could have. The first thing we kind of looked at, well, there's the image right there of the area. The first thing we really looked at was how does this connect to the rest of the city? We don't want to take everything away from downtown. Like, for example, I now live in Vernal. Well, my family lives in Vernal. They built a huge new transect up to the western part of town. Now downtown is suffering terribly. We did not want to do that here. We did not want to have a huge creation on your western town that took away from the downtown side. And so we looked at these nodes, we looked at these different aspects, and we saw what connected into this area. And we also see that it connects greatly to the Summit Ridge area, and then also predicting the future when that Transect, that planned road to bypass the city, help alleviate traffic when it will happen, that will come into this area. And then we dove into it smaller in detail, looked at how these nodes interact with each other, where were the boundaries of the site, how would it really interact, what land was suitable, what land was not suitable. And so we went more and did like a hard and soft analysis. We kind of took all the politics out of it and we kind of said, what could this land be potentially used for? We want to preserve the agriculture, make sure we kind of project what areas are more suitable for that stuff, what areas are non-suitable for those other things, and what areas were negotiable for either way. Going from that, we then wanted to really look at the topography, and this was the birthplace, the birth idea for the small you see ahead of you. So we kind of did a test print of the topography to see what it looked like so we can understand it, because when we first did the analysis, looking from Google Earth, it just looks flat. But when we came in person and saw it, like, oh, this is a game changer. So we kind of did a really topography analysis to this, and you can see the site, that entranceway down to the Summit Ridge Parkway and then Highway 6. And then to get some more inspiration and see what works and what didn't work around other places in Utah, we kind of did a president of Twila, sorry, how they kind of designed and kind of made an open space for both commercial and mixed use. We also looked at some places within Utah as well, but Twila Tech was one of our greatest impactors when we did our design. And then, as you can see, this is our master plan. So after doing all that analysis, we kind of came up with this master plan of mixed community with both commercial, health and wellness, possible that secondary transit area, possible secondary site for a train stop. This site being more generally located to the highway. So as residents from Genola, other areas can come in, they can just pull off, park, ride the subway straight up, as well as residents from downtown having more easier access from the downtown area. Potential site, that's where we were figuring that could be a cool place. the neighborhood center, this is kind of mixed use slash keeping that agriculture feel. Potential greenhouse corporation can maybe possibly move in there, or other agriculture pursuits, as well as making it partly mixed use for residential areas as that Summit Park Ridgeway kind of expands up into that area. And then as Santaquin grows, we understand that it's probably going to have another connection coming in from the south, as more of a bypass road. And that could be a perfect area for small commercial businesses or maybe some home offices. Just because people are sick of working at home nowadays. Maybe they just want a corporate office somewhere. Something they could rent out, or maybe a solid tech place, wherever it might be. But nothing high, nothing too huge, but something that fits Santaquin. And so looking at this, we kind of did our land use map, showing the areas commercial / business park, are kind of like our civic / wellness areas, possible rec source or rec building, depending on what use, and our transportation. And then with this site, because of topography, we have great opportunity for lots of natural green open space. So the dark green you see is kind of that natural green open space. The lighter green, which is smaller around the buildings, is that more manicured, more traditional park you kind of feel like with the surrounding areas, etc. And then also one thing I forgot to mention, we really wanted to take emphasis. Now this is no longer a sewage treatment plant, but instead more irrigation ponds. We wanted to make that use within our design, because that would be a very heavily focused. Anytime you have water, that attracts people. It's an amazing amenity to use, and then we did not want to design without it. And then circulation, again, the roads coming in, and etc. And then, as I mentioned, we had like 4 neighborhood districts. So like our neighborhood center with all that areas and our president images, kind of a health and wellness center. We thought that northern intersection place might be good, especially considering if residents from general and other things. We're not thinking the whole hospital, but maybe some clinics or maybe physical therapy, easy access to get to. But again, whatever might fit would work there. And then the office park, I mentioned that already. And then again, the commercial and transit spot being that secondary area that could be a very good site for a possible transit hub into the city. And then, of course, this is not all going to be built at once. We looked at this. We figured this is probably how it'd be kind of expand out, depending on what land's available right now versus in the future. Seeing that the first phase there, coming out to the second phase, and then potentially how it can possibly build out later, or if that land wishes to be saved or produced. So, yeah. And that's what it would look like eventually, possibly. So, yeah. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Josh Quigley, and I was involved with the North Gateway group. And the North Gateway looks at the entire northern section of Santaquin, all the way up to 124 South, where there's the proposed interchange. And we recognize that the vast majority of this area is not within Santaquin city limits. However, we felt that there's enough growth pressure and enough precedents within Utah County, such as Pleasant Grove, Lehigh, or even Draper, where there was no plan because it wasn't part of the city boundary. There was patchwork county development, and the agricultural heritage was lost because there just was no vision for the area. So we really wanted to tackle that head on and incorporate these areas that may potentially come into Santaquin city boundaries within the coming decades. And just a few elements we identified about the North Gateway. We wanted to celebrate this agricultural identity, respond to these immense growth pressures we're seeing throughout the county, as well as create connections to in and outside of Santaquin. A little bit about the visual character that we identified. We have the mountains to the west, this massive agricultural heritage with all the orchards, Utah Lake in the distance, the Wasatch Mountains, as well as the fact that this is the last turn until we enter this very intense urban landscape along the Wasatch Front. The biggest things affecting the North Gateway in the coming decades is the proposed new interchange to the north at 124 South, the Central Utah Project Canal and the potential for recreation or connections along this, as well as the proposed boulevard and the to-be-determined route around the north part of Santaquin. This will have a massive effect on agriculture, as well as the existing rail corridors and the proposed rail connection to hop right-of-ways in order to get the station into Santaquin. Looking at the master plan for this area, we really wanted to reorient growth and compartmentalize it around the freeway, We really wanted to keep things on the south and east side of the proposed boulevard, bringing the boulevard in closer to the existing infrastructure, and compartmentalizing growth, residential growth around the new high school plan and the new regional parks that have been proposed for the area. Overall, just keeping growth as compartmentalized and away from the open-ended agricultural style growth that we've seen in northern Utah County in recent decades. Here we can see, a proposed example of how to treat commercial growth around the new interchange. Again, hugging things alongside the freeway, avoiding sprawling out westward into the agricultural lands, maintaining open space. We see here in the south, you can see in the center the existing high school plan and parks plan, and we really wanted to create this residential gradient where we can provide ample housing for future growth while still transitioning to those existing single-family neighborhoods, as well as transitioning out towards the agriculture. So we're not putting too intensive development in areas where there may not be the space for it or the desire for that. One of the big things we wanted to maintain was connections east to the mountains as well as west out to the open agricultural spaces. Really utilizing the park and the parks plan and the canal as a sort of axis between these two, as well as buffering the ag lands with maybe natural open spaces or maybe another regional park, just to keep development pressure off of the ag land. Here's an example of maybe some residential development up against the East Bench, ways that we can preserve natural space without really heavily, creating a barrier from new development and existing development towards the mountains. And a key thing with this is we want to maintain east-west connections from the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and the Wasatch Mountains to Santaquin. And that involves, preserving natural spaces and natural corridors through new development, as well as crossing the freeway. You can see in that red circle that, if we do want to create some sort of connection from the mountains to Santaquin, crossing the freeway is going to be a critical junction that we're going to have to deal with in the future. And then here's just a view of a potential East Bench development where we preserve a lot of open space while still accommodating quite a bit of residential growth.
So as Todd said, I do have a little bit of experience, but it was a lot more head scratching than just turning gray like Todd did. He did it a little more gracefully than I have. As Todd mentioned, I grew up in Utah County. My parents are from Payson, so we drove a lot between American Fork and Payson. And when I was a kid, we drove through orchards. Orem had orchards, Grove had orchards, Pleasant Grove had orchards. Fruit Heights, that was full of fruit. And those have all changed. And those had changed incrementally over time. And I think you probably have felt that in your community. Those, 1 acre or 2 or 20 acres at a time seem to be disappearing, and the place that you maybe moved to is not the place that you live in now. And that's a continuing cycle across the Wasatch Front. So when we talk about agritourism, it's really the broadest scale of how do we support agriculture so it's viable. And agritourism is a big term for that. So I'm going to try my best to represent the work of these three great students. One thing to recognize, and you probably already know this, is Santaquin is unique. There's not a lot of places that will produce fruit like Santaquin produces. There's a lot of factors that come into that. But if Santaquin loses its orchards, they don't go down the road. Most of the orchards you see in Santaquin came from Orem and Provo because the land became too expensive and people moved down here. There's not another leapfrog down south in Nephi or Juab County. You don't have the soils and microclimates that you have here. So once it leaves Santaquin, it's gone. It's probably going to go to southern Idaho or somewhere like that. So the other thing that to recognize is you have a very unique microclimate, but you have a very unique and interesting suite of agricultural producers here. You have dairymen, you have all kinds of different fruits, you have space age type technology, tomato production going on in your community. You have a suite of amazing things going on that are agricultural focused. And that's an amazing asset that's right under everybody's noses. Maybe it's not explicit very often. So one of the issues with that is preserving or trying to incentivize agriculture to stay agriculture, and that's a very difficult topic when it comes to individual landowner rights. But I think that those landowner rights, it becomes easier to farm when the community supports the farming, and that's through regulations, it's through laws, but it's also through the spirit of the community valuing the agriculture in their community and fighting for it over time. So agritourism kind of helps in that. It can help diversify an income stream, but more than anything, I think it increases the community's connection to agriculture, and hopefully it brings people into Santaquin that are from the outside who lost that agriculture and who are now looking for some place that feels a little bit like what they grew up around, and they want to spend an afternoon here and hopefully spend some money in your community. So there's some general components to agritourism. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but thinking about these 5 different aspects helps to think through how agritourism can happen. So the students looked at this, and one thing they thought was really important is it is very easy to lose agriculture, one producer or 1 acre at a time. And that's a challenge when the agricultural community is not united in a vision or in expressing their needs. I think one of the challenges with farmers is they think if they just put their head down and work hard, everything will work out. And sometimes there's bigger systems at play that even though they work against those things, as an individual farmer, sometimes the system just beats them. And that's why the idea of the students really felt like a cooperative of both business owners, local businesses, as well as municipalities coming together to have conversations with these with these farmers to talk about what their needs are, what their challenges are, and how the community, and not the community as in the government aspect of the community alone, but how do the laws and community and agriculture work together to preserve what's important and what has become the identity of Santaquin. So the students looked at some of these ideas, that there is agritourism happening already in small experimental type scales, which is really cool. But there's a lot of agricultural land out there that isn't using agritourism as an opportunity. So they looked at this idea of creating a hub, and it's been mentioned in a few of these different presentations. And the students looked at 3 different hubs, and they're different geographically, and they're different programmatically, meaning they do different things. Again, these are 3 different ideas that you could explore as you look at trying to increase the awareness of agriculture in the community. So I'll talk about these 3 different hubs. One of them is the visitor center in the city center. The other one is looking at an education-focused center in the northern part where there's a lot of agricultural already. And the one is the southern interchange where they looked at it as creating a heritage site. So I'll talk about those individually and show some of the ideas. So this visitor center would be in the center of town. It would coordinate your tours. It'd be a place to hand out maps. It'd be kind of an urban center where a visitor might enter and enjoy what's going on in Santaquin. Maybe someone that's not from here to orient themselves in a really easy way. Be a place for farmers market, things like that. The education hub in the northern area, the focus would be more about getting people that maybe don't know much about agriculture an opportunity to learn about it. So educational opportunities like community gardens, farm-to-table cooking classes, commercial kitchens, things like that help producers that are small perhaps take something to market that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. Doing agricultural demonstrations is another idea there. So this is kind of what that could look like. The last one is the Heritage Hub to the south. It is trying to, again, celebrate the heritage of Santaquin in the southern part, which isn't very agricultural focused at this time. So it's connecting to the reservoir, and it's really servicing that southern interchange that you were shown earlier, and all those people to remember or to recognize what's important in the place they just moved into. So this is an idea of what that might look like if you were sitting there. So the other thing that's important about this is these hubs only work together as a unit, much like the cooperative. So the idea of creating an agritourism loop that people could connect not only the stuff within town that could be built but already is existing, but also looking more large scale and giving people an opportunity to experience Santaquin and what the hub that it has become for agriculture across a region is one of the big ideas that the students wanted to share with you, and that the seeds of this are already planted in your community. But there definitely needs to be institutional support, as well as the students felt like a group of farmers that are working together to make this a reality. And this is kind of, I guess a blended image of what this could look like even at the street scale. How do people move around and experience agriculture in their lives every single day? And that's just, again, it's something that most people are losing. We're losing that across the Wasatch Front, and it is something that is unique to this community. And it will only stay unique if people fight for it.
Thank you, Jake. So I was also involved in the connections team, and this sort of takes a broader view of all these different areas and how can we connect them within Santaquin, physically and programmatically. So one of the things that we really wanted to package this whole idea around was the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. And I don't know if you were aware, but one of the recent developments with this was the Bonneville Shoreline Trail Advancement Act that was just proposed to Congress, I believe, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And this bill would provide federal funding to fill all the gaps in the Bonneville Shoreline Trail from the Idaho border all the way to Nephi. You can see there the orange would be new infill and the black is the existing. And one of those sections of infill is essentially the entire shoreline trail along the eastern side of Santaquin. And so there's huge momentum for that. There's bipartisan support. It's likely to go through, and so that's something that's going to happen within the near future if it does go through. And so taking that Bonneville Shoreline Trail, we really wanted to use that as sort of a nexus for connectivity within Santaquin. Here's just a little simplified diagram, the Bonneville Shoreline Trail with the Central Utah Project Canal around Santaquin. And we look at that Bonneville Shoreline Trail as sort of that main north-south axis. And we create a loop around Santaquin, connecting all of those different areas and neighborhoods, current and future. And then we create a cross where we interconnect within downtown and the existing city infrastructure. And then we expand outwards into the foothills to the west, to the mountains to the east, as well as north and south. And maybe we can brand this as an identifiable fruit loop, this sort of simplified and branded experience around Santaquin. The fruit loop, where there's signage and everyone knows what this is and it's easy to identify and easy to follow. So for residents or for people that are visiting, just an idea, the fruit loop. And it really capitalizes on that current momentum for trail connectivity that we've seen explode in recent weeks. I don't know if you guys have been following that. But there's a lot of momentum right now for this. So breaking this down, we looked at the northern part, and one of the key connections for this that we identified was the Central Utah Project Canal, the Strawberry Canal, as a key component connecting the east mountains with the western part of town. And key to this would be converting the canal to a public right-of-way. And while there are a lot of issues with this, there's a lot of current precedents going on right now in northern Utah County with the Murdoch Canal. The city of Draper is converting a lot of canals to public right-of-way. Sandy and West Jordan did it in recent years. It's a very common thing that is happening throughout Utah at this moment. Here is a picture of the Strawberry Canal in its current state. Here is an image from the same place on what it could be, providing, mixed-use transportation for bikers and walkers, as well as creating, natural native vegetation, providing a green corridor, as well as utilizing the canal as an amenity itself. There's a lot of precedents where it's still a, what's that?
Tell us what's going on in Logan too, just to put the fear of God in these guys.
And
What's going on in Logan with the canal?
Oh, with the canal.
Yeah.
The conversion or?
They're covering them up.
Oh yeah, so Logan is pursuing a canal conversion to public right-of-way right now. However, they're going about the method that the Murdoch Canal did as well, where they do pipe the canal. Is that where you're? Yeah. So we're proposing that, and again, this is something that's a little bit outside of Santaquin's control and would require a lot of collaboration. But there's examples in Colorado and Idaho where the canal has still been daylighted, and it's still a fully functioning irrigation canal that also is now this amenity for the public. And here's that example of that. The West Gateway and Transect areas on the west side of town is that critical north-south connection on the west side. And key to this is creating connectivity within existing development as well as preserving new corridors as well. Here we could see an example of, maybe zoning or requiring a new development dedicated pedestrian connections through new commercial and residential development. And then as well as within existing development, it's as simple as widening a sidewalk from 4 feet to 8 feet creates a mixed-use path that people can utilize, as well as just, painting bike lanes. Simple solutions in existing infrastructure to create that dedicated connectivity. In the south, this is where we see the most near-term critical step towards creating this vision if we were to preserve this vision. The South Gateway is seeing the most near-term risk for potential opportunity loss due to the new development happening there. And so critical to establishing this loop is creating that public right-of-way, identifying those corridors and that connections from the foothills in the mountains in the east across the freeway to the foothills in the west. And again, that proactive planning is critical, identifying these in the zoning plan now, requiring developers to create or to preserve these corridors is the only way that this is going to happen, and it's going to happen soon in order to get ahead of the ball on this development in South Gateway. Here's an example of how we could cross the freeway, again, just utilizing the existing underpass, making it more pedestrian friendly, providing connections to the mountains as well as to the new development in South Gateway. Providing light, making it pretty, making it usable so that people want to cross the freeway to go enjoy the mountains and all the trails there. In those different green connections or corridors with new developments, we just want to make it user-friendly, as well as emphasizing native vegetation to minimize upkeep and maintenance, as well as focusing development towards these corridors rather than away from. We don't want them to be a back alley. We want this to be a main connection through the community. And then ultimately connecting all these different aspects through downtown and the existing parts of Santaquin. Amy already touched on these, talking about downtown, but providing critical connections to the north, south, east, and west, centering on that new Civic Center and 100 South. And there's a variety of ways to pursue this, as long as they are just dedicated connections that encourage people to both come into Santaquin as well as expand outwards. And overall, we want to create this streamlined vision. So you can see on the left here is the existing Santaquin trails and connectivity plan, and on the right is a simplified vision. And while the existing plan is very comprehensive, there's not very clear phases or stages or goals, what we want to do now, what we want to do in 5 years. Whereas if we can create this simplified vision, this loop around Santaquin, we can harness that current momentum for trail connectivity and really capitalize on that and create a dedicated vision moving forward. So I'll just talk a little bit about some of the conclusions from all this. One thing to preface is the stuff you're seeing today, this is an immensely pared down version of all the content we've created. This is maybe 100 images of 500 that we created. That'll all be in the document you guys can explore later when you have free time. So here, before we jump into the model, just sort of looking at our comprehensive approach, and remembering that there's significant amounts of agriculture that we want to preserve, and with this plan, we hope that we can manage to preserve. And then zooming outward to a broader scale, recognizing that we are surrounded by these incredible amenities, the Utah Lake to the north, the foothills to the west, as well as the Wasatch Mountains to the east. And if we can focus our connections and development and embrace these amenities, we can create a great future for Santaquin. So we'll transition to the model now. I believe Jake will take over that.
Yes. Let me turn this on. So as was mentioned, Justin worked to build something that was perhaps a little more interactive and conversational. So he spent...
Jake, would you like the council and others to...
Yes, you're welcome to
Around the table.
stand up. We'll get it set up and woken up. So what we did was, well, I won't say we, because Justin did this.
You helped.
Justin took on this idea of how to explain some of the exciting things that are happening, or dangerous things that are happening in your community, in maybe more of a realistic way. Most people don't experience your community on a screen; they experience it in real life. So if you think you live in the Himalaya mountains, it feels much bigger than it is. So this is an example of what your topography looks like in reality, 1 foot to 1 foot. That doesn't tell you very much, so we exaggerated the vertical 3 feet. So it's one for every 1 foot horizontally, it's 3 feet vertically. So that is why everything looks really, really tall. Okay. So Todd, with that, let me hand you, or you can come over here and use these keys.
I just wanted to say though, Justin loves to geek out on stuff. So he comes with these little things, and we said, well, these could be great little mementos or keychain or something like that. So the next thing he comes with is a chunk of this, and then pretty soon it's this big, and we're talking about distorting things and whatnot. And so we got into it, and what we all developed was a love for your city because we could, in your town, because we could see kind of the loving hands of the mountains and the topography and the foothills and the ag lands. And when you project this on it, you can really see how beautiful and unique your city is and how endangered it is in many ways. And so there's something about the physicality of this, and somebody was mentioning earlier that it really, I think Jason said, this expresses when you turn the photography off, the geomorphology, this is sort of how the nature of this place evolved from glaciers and outwash plains and the old lake bottoms and stuff. So you really learn to love it as an environmental system first, upon which we need to responsibly develop our community. So some of this shows what's happened. This is an image from earlier that shows the existing town. Now, if we look at that, you know, that's about that big. And we look at this, and then we look at what's at stake. You know, what's up for grabs, so to speak. And how has that progressed over time from 2000? So with each addition here, you see what has been consumed and where the trajectory of that growth is going in 2020 and where it is likely to go beyond that in 2030. So you see basically the filling of all this up and the compromising of some of those transect ideas that Jacob was talking about, where we really want to be sympathetic to how we come up into this part. We want to get less density, right? And we want to concentrate opportunities at the center, because the people that want to live in a more concentrated environment or who are starting as a couple and a family can't afford a detached single home, they want to be where it's walkable, and they want to be where they can walk to the farmer's market and some of that stuff. So the beauty of what these students came up with is that they are the future of your city, right? They are the people that you're going to want to come here and start businesses, and these are essentially their ideas. And everything, as Amy said, has got to throttle and connect to the downtown, because that is fundamentally, that's the DNA of your city. And so the downtown is extremely important, and really amazing job on the design of that park next to the municipal center and stuff. And, you know, stinky old professor wants them to go fight the battle on Main Street and say, no, take lanes out of Main Street and get those buildings up there. And they go, hey, well, what if we do just what the city and the citizens asked us to do? What if we go south to 100 South, look at that municipal building, and make a beautiful gathering place for everybody in the city? So, you know, they were right once again.
There's some precedents that if you've been to St. George, they did that where the boulevard became a really big, impressive road, and they kind of slid that area where the splash pad is at. I think it's on their Center Street as well, and they've got a really neat community core that functions as a downtown, even though it's not Main anymore.
Yeah. Driving down here, and I've driven down here, you know, 50 times in the last 6 years or more. It sickens me to see what happens on both sides of I-15 in terms of just what I would call, an English friend of mine said, a dog's dinner. There's a little bit of pork chop, there's a little bit of potatoes, there's a little bit of corn. Yeah. It's just like all this mishmash of stuff, and nothing is concerted. And so the opportunity here to create some structure, you have a plan that was done how many years ago, Ben? There was an organization of this in about 2008 or somewhere around then. I think the students did a really good job of creating a simple organizational diagram, and then how you deploy residential in the light and commercial in the red, and how you connect them up into those open spaces. Great job. The Transect people are really saying, how do we arbitrate or connect back into the downtown area, and how do we connect up into this area? The Transect is something that's been in planning circles for what, Jason, about 15 years. Somebody said, you need to think about your town as not being the same from here to there, right? There are things that go on here that shouldn't go on here. There are things that go on here that shouldn't go on here. We should be diminishing that energy and the density and the physical presence of development as we move up into these sensitive areas. This is the scenery that creates the wonderful setting for Santa. And then the West Gateway is an idea that, well, if young people are going to come here, they need jobs, right? To have jobs, they need, where's the growth in jobs going to be? It's going to be healthcare, It's going to be agriculture if we can steer it in that direction. It's going to be, you know, in things that haven't really been invented yet. So if we have this wonderful community that we can live in, if we have this great downtown, we still need jobs to do it. And maybe there's a place where the city owns some land where we can start to promote that in the same way that the rec center was being promoted a few years ago. And I know that that didn't pass, but I think we need to start thinking about how do we create these areas that help support a future economic opportunity for people that move here. And then, of course, there's the North Gateway. So the North Gateway is both, if I'm moving north, it's the exit from town, but as a first impression, it's really important to connect into the new bypass and the byway that comes into the community.
Well, one note on that before we move on. You'll notice that the existing proposed plan has the byway going all the way up, carving through the agricultural land. We really wanted to focus it, bring it in around the existing edge of development in order to keep pressure off the ag land as, you know, longer into the future than possible, or than currently possible. So that's one thing to note on that.
And here you have a world-class opportunity in Bonneville Shoreline Trail that comes around here. You've all heard of the Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail brings extraordinary business up and down the eastern seaboard. Because they've institutionalized it, it's become memorialized in novels and writing and books and journalism. And I think this trail is going to attract major attention.
There is precedence. You have the Arizona Trail. You have the Pacific Crest Trail. That there's trail towns that people hike and they come down. I mean, to go from Idaho to Nephi would be a pretty amazing trip.
Yeah.
And they would need to stop somewhere, and they would need to get something to eat, and they would need to be refilled, and there'd be events. There's running, you know, imagine the races and the things that could happen, and you're at the very tail end of that possibility, which is really exciting.
Well, and the incomplete sections up north are already so popular and so busy. You know, imagine how much more utilized it'll be once it's completed.
Yep.
Within, if this bill goes through within the next 1 to 3 years is the time frame.
That's awesome.
So like Jessica's grandfather said, your own fate is in your own hands. As council persons and leaders in this community, you know, it's really up to you to imagine a great town. And I came from an extremely successful campaign in Denver called Imagine a Great City. And that mayor came when the economy was down in Denver, and he put together a team of people and council members that said, we need, and this is, you know, a much different scale and context, we need a new airport, we need a place for the baseball team, we need to keep the arts downtown, you know, we need a mass transit system, we need a system that moves people efficiently, we need a dozen things here. And he set about to do those things together with the council, and we happen to participate in a number of those things that made Denver what it is today. So if you don't determine it, it's going to get determined like that crappy stuff on I-15 up and down. It's going to be determined by individuals. None of them are mean-spirited. None of them have Santaquin's interests. They're not against Santaquin. It's just that they're only thinking in very narrow terms. So carrying that message to developers, looking at the permitting process, having the will to stand up and say, no, this is what we want to do. Putting together an idea of agritourism and supporting agricultural business. I think that's what your future's about. And we're so charmed by this place, and I just open it up to conversation.
There's a couple more images.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, so like again, like
Connections.
what he's saying is like this is only going to work though if everything's connected, if everything works well together.
Just if you keep going.
So this is the connection system.
There's a simplified one though.
Yeah, just keep going.
Yeah. So that's the north, the
The
East,
Bonneville.
the centerpiece,
south.
South.
Most important.
West Hill. So now I've got all my assets covered, right? I got my assets connected up here. I've got assets connected there. I'm reinforcing the asset at the center. I'm creating new gateways, and I'm preserving agriculture out here. Amazing job, you guys.
Yes.
Really.
Well done.
Questions?
Yeah.
just like to make a comment. Whether we do all of this or none of this, this is very impressive and great ideas, things we'll definitely look at for the future. Thank you so much. This is unbelievable. Just fantastic work on this.
And we're giving this to you as a city, by the way. So this is given to you.
Make this a permanent exhibit in the hallway.
Just leave it up.
We will find a place for it, I promise that.
We're talking about a new city hall tonight.
Oh,
Right in the center.
There you go.
Hey, if you
Perfect
do
location.
one thing, make the fruit loop happen. So.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I love the simplified trail map because the current one is so overwhelming. And so to have the simplified one to say, okay, this is a starting point. Let's get these main connections done first, a piece at a time, and then we can add other things if we want to. But I really like the simplicity of that because it's clear, it's focused, it's targeted, and it's doable. It's not so overwhelming. So I like that a lot. And I've always loved the downtown on 100 South one. I was really excited about that the first time I heard it. So yeah.
I'd like to ask the students and you guys, I used to be married into the fruit side of care. And so I know the story you're talking about. You know, you can go up by Ogden and notice that it's came this way. And I agree with you, this is probably the last. The problem is how do you guys see when land values become so, what I want to call it, I feel
Extreme.
way out of control now.
Astronomical.
But when farmers see when ground becomes so valuable that it's at that point saying, you know, wait a minute, it's time for us to go because they can take, and what happened in Orem is that they were they got a lot of money. They come down here and bought orchards, 30 cents on the dollar. Is that, I see kind of that as a fear here too, eventually, that the land values because of the growth will push that almost out of here.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the system you're talking about is the one that it's the free market, right?
Yeah.
And so in no way can you tell a farmer to stay and farm the ground.
Right.
And orchards are especially difficult because if you leave them alone, they just fall apart, right? They're a very, very intense type of agriculture. Our best attempt at helping with that was, does the community cry when when a tree falls, right? If a tree falls and the community doesn't cry, does anybody care? Maybe, right? And I think that's what happened in a lot of places. Everybody said, oh man, another orchard fell. Well, on to the next thing, right? Well, at least we got a Payless shoe store close by now, right? And I think some of the missing pieces were, are orchards part, or is agriculture part of your community festivals? Is it part of everything, not just a sign? If the developments are called Rowley's Way and Old Orchard Drive and Cherry Lane, you've lost it, right? And then we see that you look up across all those places.
Yep.
The subdivisions are named after the things they took out.
Yep.
And so if you have and my warning to you is if you have a developer coming here with Orchard Estates, be careful. Because once you've traded those orchards, you don't get them back. And we can grow houses in a lot of different places. You can't grow trees.
And if I could make a comment along those lines, going back to why we approached Utah State University is our goal as a city to have a proactive vision and not continue to react to things that were coming on our desk, because we have to do that. We're bound by laws and we have zoning in place and people have property rights, but it was a lot of reacting to people's proposals and trying to stay on top of that. This has been a great start to a proactive vision and a proactive planning effort to look at that and to realize what's there. And Jake touched it in some of the parts that he talked about, but I think really to combat the high land values that orchard owners are dealing with and possibly selling, we have to help them make it more economically viable.
Mm-hmm.
So orchard land is going to be cheap. It's in green belt, so it's not taxed as much and things like that. But if they can find a way to make that land more valuable by having agritourism, having opportunities for people to come and see it and spend their money in ways to experience it, that will create value that will offset the rising land value. So that's why, and frankly, our first approach to them was completely surrounded around agritourism.
Yep.
And they expanded upon that and looked at a grander vision, and they have come with a lot of great ideas. But that was the whole start of this, was agritourism and how to preserve that agricultural heritage in a way, in an economic way, through experiencing that very asset.
You know what? One thing on that was really interesting was we were able to meet with Rowleys, and we were able to talk to them about their sort of endeavors into agritourism, and just a single couple Facebook announcements brought in 600 people over 3 days, and so just sort of this idea that there's so much demand for this that how many people could you bring in on a monthly or annual basis if the city was advertising this or making this a much larger thing. And all the precedents we were looking at for successful agricultural preservation in communities through agritourism it wasn't just proactive involvement with the city, it was intensive involvement for the city and the farmers. And so that seems to be the recipe for success, is just this constant collaboration between you guys as well as the farmers from an agritourism standpoint.
So people get so mad at us all the time with every new development, every new application, and like Jason was touching on, the rules of the game are the rules of the game, and we have to abide and play by those. But the key is to take this vision and then to put it into implementation through the next steps, which is our general plan.
Yep.
And then our general plan actually converting that into code so that we change the rules of the game,
right,
so that we are proactive. And that's this effort that's gone on. And I often feel like our community is divided because they think that we're just out for the developers, when actually we're more united than ever before. It's just that we're bound by law, and we need to change those laws so that they can form and build upon the vision of tomorrow.
Yep.
And it takes time, because it balances the needs of the community against the needs of the individual property owner. And whenever you infringe upon that, you have to go through a process to do so. And so it's very challenging, and I just wish our community could see that we should not be pulling each other down, but rather uniting behind this and behind the vision of tomorrow.
Yeah, I think, Ben, to your point there, and to Jason, your point, it is a free market. It will remain a free market, right? Hopefully, if everything. But in that free market, there are tools that have been used and proven across Utah and across the Intermountain West, across the U.S. Things like transfer of development rights, and that's a bigger sort of hammer or tool to use. But what it does is it takes the value of that land that the farmer has, and you're right, as an orchard, it's worth what, $10,000 an acre. As a development's worth $100,000. I don't know. I'm throwing numbers out because I'm not good at math. But that $90,000 difference is what you ask the farmer to lose by keeping it in an orchard, or their kids or their grandkids, right? I mean, that's the Faustian bargain you're asking them to make. Keep working your guts out for $10,000 an acre when you could turn it around for $100 and walk away and move to Idaho and buy 10 acres on for every one you've sold, right? No, it doesn't take an economist to figure that number out. So the difference is you buying that $90,000 of value, and they stay on it as a farm, but they've given the development rights to somebody else to intensify your downtown or to build more units somewhere else. So there are tools that exist. They're a little bit, sometimes they're hard for people to swallow because they do sort of, they hearken on, but I think it's a balance between private property rights and the rules of the game. And Ben's exactly right. The ideas that these students created have no authority whatsoever. They never have. Their ideas, they're hopefully a vision of what someone that wants to live here in the future wants in their community. But the idea is that these big ideas that sometimes might raise the hair on your back of your neck, like, I don't know, that's a lot of people down there. They start a conversation, and that conversation leads into your general plan, which creates that vision. And I guess I would say engage your general plan update. You don't get very many chances to reimagine your community. You have a great consultant working with you. People Plus Place is great. They're working hard to create an awesome general plan, and with your help. But make sure you are in the weeds on the general plan, because every word matters, because then it feeds into law and ordinance and the stuff that become the rules of the game. But the rules are set by vision, always. They always have been. So if you have no vision, the rules will be whoever develops them, right? So that's the hope. And to Jason and Ben's credit, as far as timing goes, it's been amazing to work with you right at the cusp of that visionary idea, that hopefully this creates a little bit of a, we've cut through some of the waves of questions to give it an idea, that then hopefully there'll be more rich conversations around your general plan, which really is where the authority lies. But it doesn't happen unless people like you care a lot about it. That's a heavy load on top of all the other loads you carry as elected officials and staff. But
And the key is not you, the key is us.
and appointed officials.
It's gotta be us.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I would rather carry that load than live with the consequences of not having a vision, not having a plan, not fighting for what we believe, what I believe. I won't speak for anybody else, but what I would believe is the best path forward for all of our residents.
Yeah, I guess the reality of it is, if you want to see what happens when the free market wins, drive from here to Brigham City.
Reactive versus proactive.
Yeah, and it's really, really hard. It's that way for a reason. I mean, it's because the rules of the game aren't necessarily always best for a community. And I think there's many arguments. There's aesthetic arguments, there's sense of place arguments, but there's money arguments.
There's also, though, zoning restrictions. So if they buy the agricultural land and they have to rezone to get that development in, we can stop that a little bit. And so at least we can try to push our general plan towards them to say this is what we envision before you buy this land.
Yep.
Like, because we have rights to not rezone that. So.
It's a very tough balance you all, or line you all walk as elected officials, between how do you build a community but also respect the needs of the people. And for those of us who are on the other side of the rostrum, we thank you for being willing to come here at night on weekends and make it happen. It's been really cool to work with your community.
Well, I can say while all of us are here gathered together, that there are a lot of fruit growers in this area who are also fighting to keep their businesses going, to keep their orchards going. And that's evidenced in their efforts to expand their agritourism, to have U-Picks in the fall for different fruits and vegetables, to have blossom tours, to allow 5Ks through their orchard, to do educational outreach. Most of them are investing heavily in their property. And a tour that Jason and I took a couple of weeks ago with a couple of farmers, and Ben and Penny were with a different person, and Norm had to leave, right? So, but we ended up in different vehicles with different farmers and toured around, and the monetary and labor investment that these orchard growers are putting into their land is just outstanding. And so I just want to take the opportunity to speak for them and thank them for all that they are already doing, and say that I believe we in this room are all on the same page in supporting them in those efforts and doing what we are able to do to just shore up that foundation instead of allowing it to be washed away.
That's it. One thing you do have going, orchards are a lot more acceptable as an agricultural commodity than hog farming or mink farming or something like that. That you guys do have it's a different kind of heritage that's aesthetically beautiful. It's easy to live by, kind of, but you still have that problem where people want to come, they want to live in the rural area, but then they're mad that the farmers are spraying their trees at 2:30 in the morning. The fans are running and it's too noisy. I love the country, but I don't like. So there are things like that I think is a system. And one thing that when we talked in the shred is I think the danger in here is that think I've ever bored somebody
go
to
ahead.
falling.
Yeah.
What I was saying is it's a system. So where you can have one alfalfa field and it can disappear and it doesn't really affect alfalfa production. If you lose a certain number of fruit farms, then the packing plant can't stay viable, or if the packing plant goes down, the other ones. It is a house of cards. And at some point, there's a tipping point where no one can make it because there's not enough collective mass. So something to remember.
Well, I kind of feel you're talking about a vision, right? So to me, the vision's got to be that the city and these guys, we all need to come together.
Yeah.
For what it benefits the city, it'll also benefit for them. We need to get back to some of that trust. I mean, I remember years ago when the sewer went in, the lagoons. There was a wedge there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we've come a long ways, you know, with building a rapport with these guys. And I think the vision has to be between the city and the farmers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
I think there's some cool opportunities. There's some case studies you'll see in the document. And I don't know how this works with cities, but if you could travel to some of these places, you know, Hood River, Oregon, or this place, Serenbe, that you can see where agriculture and community have come together and done some really neat things. You know, it's always hard to say, wow, that's Oregon, you know, that's not like us. Then you drive around there like, man, this would be a cool place. If you guys can go somewhere and check these kind of places out, it might really help you, you know, come to a consensus on what it could look like in reality. Because pictures are hard to, you know, these images help get an idea, but seeing it, walking around at it, if you guys could take some field trips and not get the ire of the community because you're going to see places, I think that's pretty powerful. And take the farmers with you.
Vacation.
And talk to the other farmers or people in that area.
Yeah, the people that are
See how
actually
they've
working
made
the
it
land.
work. Yeah.
Well, I think that's all we have. I know I think we're actually past probably the time you guys are supposed to be doing all the other business.
Thank you again.
So Justin built this for you guys. So however you want to use it, we'll share with you the images that you can project down.
On a loop.
Yeah, and however you want to use it, we can help you with that.
We have a timeline you guys can do of Google Earth images. If you guys want to see a timeline, or show the presentation as we show it to you guys.
Yeah, it'll be so beautiful in our new city hall. Yeah.
Hopefully, it's fun to play with. So.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Put the general plan.
Thank you so
Exactly, that'd be
much.
pretty cool.
I love it.
Yeah,
You guys
Hopefully
have
it's just like
well, no, that's a great
but-
point. Is any future maps or images
Yeah.
you make of Santaquin you can
You could
project
put on
onto
there.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you're doing like a featured
Thank you,
project
guys.
and
You're
you
welcome.
circle around it.
That's a great.
Yes. So we're gonna leave this here, and
You guys
I'll.
are so nice.
Jason, it's all, you can take it apart, and I guess we probably should have gave Jason an overview of how to do it, but we'll leave it to the Bay Area.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
All right.
I see your face.
Thank you, students and faculty.
How are you?
for being here.
This thing comes apart. It's in vertical sections. Yep, so this whole thing comes apart.
Or really, we can almost just lift this.
It's in two pieces. It's really in two pieces. So the white, you just look like the whole base comes